Neto or Hee-chan, Douglas Luiz or Bailey, these are the discussions that we need to have going into Game Week 26, as well as what to do with our chips. Few strategies that I need to discuss in this video, including what I plan on doing with my team. So as always, if you're looking forward to today's video, please do consider dropping a like, aim for 300 on this video. And of course, if you could smash that subscribe button, it is always massively appreciated. So enough chatting, let's get into today's video. So there's no better place to start than the discussion between who you should buy in your teams, Neto or Hee-chan. Now, we're going to come into discussion later on in this video about the pros and cons of bringing in Wolves players. But I just wanted to give you a bit of an idea on where I would go if I was looking to buy one of these two. So both very similar price, Hee-chan at 5.5 million, Neto at 5.7. And we've got both the touch heat map and the underlying numbers for both players here, courtesy of Fantasy Football Fix. So first up, let's take a look at Hee-chan. You can see here plenty of touches in and around the penalty box area, as well as on the wide areas, but very, I would say, similar to that of Neto. Neto predominantly being the wide man in this Wolves team, with Hwang being much more of a penalty box merchant, as we do like to call him. And realistically, when we look at the underlying numbers, that is reflected here. Goal scoring is all about Hee-chan, 0.58 goals per 90 compared to Neto's 0.14. There is a huge difference in their goal scoring. That's also reflected in the expected goals per 90, 0.41 for Hee-chan, 0.19 for Neto. Now, shots slightly in Neto's favour, but realistically, there is nothing in it between the two. And shots in the box, once again, pretty much identical. So there's not really much to split them. But when it comes to actually being the creator in this Wolves team, that is where Neto comes into his own. 0.61 goal assists per 90 compared to Hee-chan's 0.17. So a big discrepancy there. But I would argue that the difference between them in assists is the same as Hee-chan's in goals. So we very much have differing assets here. We have Hee-chan, the goal scorer, versus Neto, the chance creator. Now, both are very similar on bonus points per 90, 0.59 for Hee-chan, 0.54 for Neto. So there's very little to split between the two. And because of that reason, I don't think we need to stress too much about this decision. Both are 90-minute men in these Wolves teams, especially with the injury to Cunha. And I think based on these underlying numbers, could Neto go off and become the better asset? Absolutely. But while I'm looking at these numbers, at 5.5 million, I want to get the goal scorer in any team that I buy from. And that man is going to be Hee-chan. Now, I'm going to put the fixtures up right now because this is the time to buy Wolves if you're not already. Of course, it depends on what kind of strategy you are going for. But if you want to buy Wolves, it has to be now with that fantastic home game against Sheffield United. Now, I've taken a look at the numbers of Sheffield United away from home since Chris Wilder has been in charge, and they aren't actually terrible. So I'm not actually expecting Wolves to be beating Sheffield United here 5-0 like other teams have done so. Sheffield United away from home are actually a lot better than that at home. So while I actually think it is a little bit contradictory, and I'm one of those that don't expect Wolves to be beating Sheffield United by a handsome number, I still think the opportunity is there to be taken advantage of. And I think Hee-chan is going to be the pick of the two. But I really want to make sure you know that there isn't much between them. I do think there are benefits to going for one or the other. Hee-chan, though, being the goal scorer, is going to be my pick. And also when we do look at the fixtures here, Game Week 29 is the big one, and we're going to come on to that in a minute later on in the video, because that could be a blank game week for Wolves. So you are buying a player that is potentially going to blank in Game Week 29. So you might only get 3 game weeks worth of value, then they blank, and then you might have to play a free hit if your team's in a bit of trouble. So Hee-chan is the man for me of these two. But we're now going to come on to Aston Villa assets, where if you are worried about Game Week 29, and want a player that is guaranteed to play in that week, then maybe avoiding Wolves and buying Aston Villa is the route to go for. Okay, so the two assets that we realistically are considering for Aston Villa are going to include Douglas Luiz and Leon Bailey. And the same premise here, we got the touch heat maps and also their numbers based on per 90 minutes. So first up, let's address the touch heat maps because they are very, very different. We have Douglas Luiz being an all-action midfielder and importantly, on set pieces on both sides, predominantly off that left flank though. And then we can see Leon Bailey being that traditional right side of the front three or as a second forward with plenty of penalty box touches and solely operating on that right wing. And again, taking set pieces as well, even though Douglas Luiz arguably is the main man for set pieces. And that's one thing that we do need to note when we are comparing the two. Douglas Luiz is the penalty taker for Aston Villa, and that does always hold a lot of value when we are considering FPL assets. For me, when you have a penalty taker, it doesn't matter how bad the team plays. It doesn't matter how bad the player plays. If they get a penalty and they score it, then they usually are in amongst the points and bonus points. Now, looking at the underlying numbers for both, you can see that there is a common trend here. Leon Bailey destroys Douglas Luiz in every single department. Goals per 90 is in Leon Bailey's favour at 0.53 compared to Douglas Luiz's 0.31. The XG is very, very close. 0.28 for Bailey compared to Douglas Luiz's 0.27. But I do need to throw a caveat here because, as I said, Douglas Luiz is on penalties. If we were to take out penalties, the expected goals per 90 without them is actually very, very differing. So I'm just going to get this up here in front of me because I'm aware you haven't got it in front of yourselves. So the XG per 90 non-pen for Douglas Luiz is actually 0.13 compared to Leon Bailey's 0.28. So Leon Bailey is actually twice that of Douglas Luiz. But again, we don't need to disregard penalties. It's actually a bonus that a player has them. Now, in terms of shots, Bailey leads the way once again. Shots in the box is the big one for me. Only 0.65 for Douglas Luiz, whereas Leon Bailey's at 1.91. That's a big factor. I always want the guy who is taking those shots in the box because naturally that's why the XG is going to be higher and in their favour. And also, I kind of had the feeling that Douglas Luiz was going to be the chance creator in this Aston Villa team, being on a lot of set pieces. But once again, Leon Bailey is the man. 0.46 goal assists per 90, and he also leads the way for expected assists. So if I'm comparing the two right now, Leon Bailey is not a rotation risk. Do not let anybody convince you that. What Leon Bailey is a potential minutes risk. There's a big difference there. I think Leon Bailey starts every single game for Aston Villa as long as he's fit, but he does have the tendency to come off around 70, 75 minutes. And if you are buying Aston Villa this game week, realistically, you're wanting to have them between now and game week 29. So you want the player that is going to play regularly. I think Leon Bailey does, but when we add up all of those games, let's say he comes off 15 minutes earlier than Douglas Luiz each and every game, add that all together and we get close to 90 minutes worth of information there where Douglas Luiz can come into his own. And when we do look at bonus points, that is where Douglas Luiz is really, really in his own element. 0.96 bonus points per 90 for Douglas Luiz, only 0.46 for Leon Bailey. And a big contributor to that will be, of course, him coming off earlier and Douglas Luiz just coming in late on those bonus points. So looking at the fixtures, because, of course, that is a big consideration. As we discussed, if you're buying Aston Villa now, you also have them for game week 29, which is a real big bonus. We do need to remember that. And I actually think the entry point is not bad at all. Nottingham Forest at home for Aston Villa is great. Then Luton away, another great fixture. And even Spurs at home I think is absolutely fine. West Ham away, with the form they're in right now, I think also that's a good fixture. So to conclude, if I had to pick one of the two right now, just because I would be buying them now to own up until game week 29, I'm going to go for Douglas Luiz. However, I do think Leon Bailey is the higher ceiling player. But I want a player that I know is going to play every single game, 90 minutes and on penalties. And unfortunately, that is going to be Douglas Luiz. Even though it does not excite me at all, it is going to be Douglas Luiz. Now, in terms of who I'd go for between Aston Villa and Wolves, that all depends on what your chip strategy is. And we're going to come into that now, so make sure you do stick around for that. Okay, so blank game week 26 is super important because not only do we have to try and field 11 players for this game week because, of course, we have some popular teams not playing, we also need to be very, very thoughtful of future fixtures. Now, again, I think Wolves and Aston Villa, regardless, are good purchases for your team. But this right here, taken from Ben Crellin, shout out to him, the fixture guru, we have the potential projections for blank game week 29. So as you can see, West Ham versus Villa, confirmed. Fulham versus Spurs, confirmed. And Burnley versus Brentford, confirmed fixture. Now we have what could actually equate to a blank. So Brighton versus Man City, the most likely to be a blank. And the reason being is all that has to happen is Brighton beat Wolves or Man City beat Luton. And realistically, we'd expect one of those to happen. Everton versus Liverpool. Liverpool need to beat Southampton. Again, you probably would, if you were a betting man, say that that is likely to happen. Wolves versus Bournemouth is the interesting one, because right now, I think the reason why people are a little bit off buying Wolves is because they're worried that they don't play in game week 29. And for that to be a blank, Wolves either have to beat Brighton, which I don't think is actually guaranteed, or Bournemouth have to beat Leicester. And once again, don't think that's guaranteed at all. That's a Leicester team who are top of Championship against a Bournemouth team who are going to give them a great game. So neither of those are guarantees, even though the odds do say that. Arsenal versus Chelsea for me is the absolute crucial one. Now, I'm a Chelsea fan, and I know what Chelsea are like. We have Leeds 3 days after the Carabao Cup final. Win or lose that Carabao Cup final, I do not think that's good preparation at all for that game. And I know what these Chelsea players are like. We step up in the big games and we shy away from the quote-unquote easier games. We may well win it, but as I've stated here, Chelsea play 3 days after and they're against a high-flying Leeds team. If Chelsea lose that game, all of a sudden, Arsenal versus Chelsea happens in game week 29. And all of a sudden, a free hit in game week 29 doesn't feel as essential, because realistically, a lot of us have Watkins, a lot of us have 1 or 2 Spurs assets. Naturally, a lot of us have 2 to 3 Arsenal players, 1 Chelsea player. You already have the core game week 29 players. And then if we just add a sprinkling of maybe another Tottenham or an Ivan Toney closer to game week 29, all of a sudden doesn't feel essential. Now, a few other key bits that I've put here. Game week 29 will not be confirmed until the game week 27 deadline. So we'll hear nothing for game week 26, but we'll know exactly what's happening before game week 27. And also, as I've stated here, Aston Villa are the only sensible buy in game week 26 of those that are guaranteed to play in game week 29. The reason why I say that is because you can't buy Spurs this week because they blank in game week 26. I don't think anyone feels confident on West Ham right now to be investing. Villa this week at home against Nottingham Forest feels like a good entry point, as well as guaranteeing you a fixture for game week 29. So I want to make that clear that your transfers this week are very, very important, because you need to have one eye on game week 29. But the next slide that I want to discuss is why, even though Aston Villa make a lot of sense because it gives you flexibility with your trip strategy, I think we need to remember the fixtures that we have in front of us and not just completely being blindsided by this game week 29. So what I've done here is put up the fixtures courtesy of Fantasy Football Fix. Shout out to you guys for the fixtures. Now, I've taken out a few teams. Yes, I am guilty, but you didn't want to know those teams anyway. They were teams that none of us were going to buy from. So I've put the relevant teams, but what I have done is I've taken out game week 29 to get a bit of an idea on which teams we should be targeting. Now, just a bit of a spoiler alert, I'm intending just to have no plan right now. And the reason being is we don't know what's going to happen in the FA Cup. What we do know is that Bournemouth have a double in game week 28, which is very, very important and imperative to have at least one player from that double. Realistically, is going to be Dominic Solanke. And what we do know is that game week 26 is a fantastic fixture for Wolves assets. So if you were to tie yourself down to a free hit in game week 29, it means that you can buy players from Bournemouth, even if you wanted to start investing now, because as you can see with the fixture ticker, they have Man City, which isn't great, but then Burnley, a double in 28, a great game week 30 team. So if you do end up getting tied down to a free hit in 29, you still can buy Bournemouth and you're absolutely fine doing so. Also, the same does apply for Wolves to some extent. Now, as I discussed, I don't think I want to buy Wolves this week because they have Sheffield United at home, Newcastle away, who are defensively all over the place, Fulham at home. Then they have a few trickier ones with Aston Villa, but then they have Burnley. So what I'm trying to say here is I don't think we need to be fixated on a chip in game week 29. My advice is going to be this. If you want to make a transfer this week and just guarantee yourself a fixture in game week 29, it makes sense to go to Aston Villa because Douglas Luiz is perfectly fine for this week. He plays Luton away, which I would say is better than Wolves' game. Then they got Spurs at home. So Villa make a lot of sense. They have good fixtures at the back end of game week 29 as well, and it means that you can be flexible with your trip strategy. But for me, playing the fixtures that are in front of us are really, really important. So I think targeting Wolves is a good time to do so. Then we'll understand what happens ahead of game week 27 with the FA Cup games. If you have bought Hwang in your team, all of the favourites win, and we only have 3 fixtures in game week 29, for example, then you can just accept that a free hit in game week 29 is right for your team. You then decide to buy Bournemouth players in game week 27, piling on them knowing that their fixtures are good out the back of the game week 29 free hit. Game week 29 free hit, you bring in those players that you don't own. Brentford, you bring in Spurs if you haven't started to invest in them already. You start to bring in those West Ham players that we're all scared to bring in. So I just wanted to cover that off here because I think it's really important that you don't just try and buy players for the sake of accommodating a team for game week 29. Target the fixtures that are in front of us. What will be in the FA Cup games, and then you can start to navigate from game week 27 onwards. So a quick slide that I thought would be really important is to give you a bit of an idea on what direction FPL managers are going in. Now, I doubt anybody has seen this before because it hasn't really been advertised, but it's an unbelievable tool on Fantasy Football Fix. Again, shout out to them. And I wanted to give you a bit of an idea on what direction managers are going in with their Jota and Darwin replacements. So first up, you can see here, the most popular transfer from Darwin is to Ollie Watkins. 36% of sales from Darwin are going to Watkins. 32% of Darwin sales are going to Solanke. And 25% of Darwin sales are going to Hwang. So all of those make a lot of sense. Watkins plays in every game week and he's pretty essential. Solanke makes a lot of sense because of the double in game week 28. But I thought that'd be really handy if you're a Darwin owner, just to get a bit of an idea on what direction managers are going in. For me, if you already have Watkins and you own Darwin, doing Darwin to Solanke this week makes a lot of sense, especially if you're struggling to field 10 or 11 players this game week. Now, the same applies for Diogo Jota. That is Diogo Jota over there. It's just his name's very different on the game. So again, 29% of transfers out for Diogo Jota are currently going to Bukayo Saka. And that's really interesting because those that already own Saka are kind of rubbing their hands a little bit because you're one transfer ahead of those that are having to scrap for Saka. Second most popular is Diogo Jota to Hwang at 22% of the transfers. And third most popular is Diogo Jota to Neto. Interestingly, only 6% of transfers from Diogo Jota are going to Douglas Luiz. So you can see the popularity right now is towards Wolves. And again, if those fixtures do happen and Wolves blank in game week 29, I think there's going to be a lot of free hits used in game week 29 based on what I'm seeing on these transfers. If Arsenal blank, if Wolves blank, these transfers alone are kind of tying in people for that free hit. So let me know who your replacements are. I thought it would be really handy just to give you an indication on where the market are going. So last up, I thought it would be quite helpful for me to show you my Game Week 26 team right now and my current transfer plans. I feel like my team is quite relatable to others, being a double Liverpool owner. Oh, what luck we had. So just to give you a bit of an idea here, I have 4.2 million in the bank and one free transfer available. And as I've discussed already in this video, if you don't know already, I'm not one of those that wants to tie myself down to a chip strategy. I'm just of the opinion that we just accept what will be in the FA Cup. I want to look at the fixtures that are presented to me right now in Game Week 26. And that to me is Wolves at home against Sheffield United. Now again, I'm probably going to look back at this and say to myself, think about what you're saying, because I've already discussed, I think Sheffield United away from home are a lot tougher than what they are at home. The underlying numbers do suggest that. And Wolves at home, they're not necessarily prolific goal scorers. So I would not be surprised if this is a low scoring game. I am going to clip this and come back to it when that does happen. But as of the time recording right now, Diogo Jota to Hwang is a player that I want for this game week. And as I said, if they do blank in game week 29, that is just what will happen. I can free hit in game week 29, no problems whatsoever. But like I said, I want to target the fixtures in front, because what if Chelsea lose against Leeds? All of a sudden, I've got the player that I wanted in Hwang. I've got the other players that I wanted. I'm targeting those games. And I also have the luxury of not needing to free hit in game week 29. So Hwang coming to the team makes a lot of sense. Now, the big decision is, I could end up just playing Charlie Taylor and start an 11, but I do think there is potential rotation risk. We don't know if Charlie Taylor returns. Do we even know if Ake starts? Do we know if Foden might get rotated? And for that very reason, I think I might take a -4 this week. I know I don't necessarily want Darwin Núñez from game week 27 because Dominic Solanke, as I discussed, is an essential player. So maybe just making the -4 this week makes a lot of sense. So Darwin Núñez out for Dominic Solanke. It isn't great because, of course, he is at home against Man City, but Man City aren't necessarily completely watertight defensively. And what it does for my team, it just gives me that little bit of luxury of benching Charlie Taylor this week. I get to field an 11 where hopefully they all do play. And if one doesn't, at least I do have one bench that could potentially help out. I don't want to put myself in a situation where I'm down to 10 or 9 players and I look back and think, I knew I wanted Solanke, why don't I just bring him in? So a -4 is very likely for me this week with a captaincy on Erling Haaland. Now, again, coming into game week 27, I can't lie, I'm just not really looking this far in advance. I would love to sit here and say to you, this is what my transfer plan is going to be, but the games in the FA Cup are just going to completely dictate what I do with my team. Yes, I could field a bust team right now and it would look something like this, most likely, with Dubravka coming in at home against Wolves. And the team looks okay, I could roll a transfer, but once again, we just don't know what's going to happen. We could see a major upset, which means that piling in on Man United players might become imperative for our FPL team. So again, just want to reiterate, I think the FA Cup games are massive. I think we need to look at the games that are in front of us and know that if something happens and you need to free hit in game week 29, so be it. I think it's absolutely fine of a strategy. So let me know your thoughts in the comments. My plan right now is to sell Jota and Darwin and bring in Hwang and Solanke. Yes, guys, okay, that is going to wrap up today's Game Week 26 preview video. I hope I've covered off a lot of the hot topics, but as always, if I've missed anything, let me know in the comment section and I'll be sure to answer them. I try and get to every single comment. Again, if you're not already, please do consider becoming a subscriber. It'd be amazing to have you for the back end of the season. I'm going to be doing a Game Week 26 Q&A hopefully tonight. My Game Week 26 team selection will be coming tomorrow, and I will be doing a deadline live stream. So make sure you are subscribed. As always, have an amazing day, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care. Cheers.